Well, we got through chapter 19 with diseases of the immune system with not too many icky slides. From now on, there's always going to be a few that are pretty dramatic, and that seems to be because they always use the worst case scenario for the images in medical and microbiology textbooks. So today's lecture will be diseases of the skin and eyes. We talked about the skin in our innate immunity chapter because it is our first barrier, our first non-specific barrier against pathogens. But of course, pathogens are pathogens able to cause illness because they can evade those defenses. So we have folliculitis, keeping in mind that itis means inflammation of. Inflammation is one of our non-specific innate immune responses. So this is an inflammation of the hair follicles. Acne can also be a type of folliculitis, but they become clogged with the lipids, fatty acids, and dead skin cells. During puberty, our skin tends to change and have more oils in it. Even good hygiene may not be able to remove them quickly enough to prevent a buildup that traps bacteria underneath. They eat the oils, they cause the inflammation. Our once again single slide anatomy and physiology of the skin. Our dermis being the lower layer and the epidermis, the top layer of our skin. And we also have the hypodermis, under lower. We have the sweat pores, hair follicles, and sebaceous glands that are all places where even without damage to the skin, pathogens can enter. And if they get below that epidermis, then they have access to getting deeper into tissues. You do not have to memorize all of these areas and the types of bacteria that are in them. It is just showing that depending on where we're at on the skin, there are different species of bacteria that prefer those areas. And what I have put up here is that the skin is very dry, and so the microbes have to be able to tolerate water loss or lack of water. Gram-positives can do that better than gram-negatives because of their thick cell wall. Also, our skin does have sweat, which is salty. So the microbes that live on our skin that are part of us have to be able to tolerate that salty environment. So Staphylococcus epidermidis is the primary one, but there are some other gram-positives. There are Bacteroides, there are Proteobacteria. There are just a lot of different groups that you do not have to memorize, but you do need to know that the organisms that live on us as part of our normal microbiota are ones that can survive a dry environment and a salty environment. A closer look at acne. Again, this is a fairly bad case of acne. The inflamed hair follicles, we get a white head here that's shown is the infected hair follicle that is purulent, meaning it has a collection of dead bacteria and white blood cells and fluid, and that can lead to a furuncle, inflammation area. And an abscess is a lesion that is filled with pus. Again, that is our white blood cells and dead bacteria. Some of our non-specific immunity that's come to the rescue and gobbled up the bacteria, but now we have this irritated lesion. We will be talking about the eyes, so our one slide eye anatomy. We have our lacrimal ducts producing tears, the nasolacrimal duct because our tears drain down through our nostrils, and there's our lacrimal gland that's going to be producing the tears. We talked a little bit about that with our innate immunity because tears, just the liquid and the blinking, is a mechanical way of washing the surfaces of our eyes. And the tears also have that lysozyme enzyme that protects us. But the bacteria can get into the hair follicles where our eyelashes are. They can get into our tear ducts and cause problems. A side view of the eye. Sometimes the diseases of the eyes get linked in with diseases of the nervous system because the optic nerve is directly at the back of the eye. We're sticking it in with the skin. So the conjunctiva is this outer layer of the eye. The pupil, of course, is what's letting the light in and out. Our lens is behind that, and the fluid that fills our eyeball is the vitreous humor. And that substance should be completely sterile, but the conjunctiva, since it is exposed to the outer environment, can have low numbers of bacteria on it. Here are the dramatic pictures. These poor individuals. Conjunctivitis, inflammation of the conjunctiva, and in this case they also seem to have inflammation in their eyelid, but the conjunctiva is definitely inflamed. Blepharitis, eyelids. So a blink is also known as a blepharospasm. The blephara are your eyelids. And keratitis and inflammation of the cornea. So microbes have gotten below that conjunctiva and gotten to the cornea. You can see that it is cloudy due to the inflammation happening. You have seen the plate on the left. That is a mannitol salt agar. It is a tool that is used for identifying Staphylococcus. It is very salty. It has that 7.5% sodium chloride, so only salt-tolerant microbes will grow. And then it has the mannitol, that organisms that can ferment that mannitol will produce acid and cause the color change to yellow. Both bacteria on this plate grew quite well. The agar stayed red on this side, so it did not ferment mannitol. The organism on this side did ferment mannitol. And typically, if you have a gram-positive coccus that grows on mannitol salt agar and ferments mannitol, then it is Staphylococcus aureus. And that is just a electron micrograph of the Staph aureus. Furuncles are also called boils. They are often caused by Staphylococcus bacteria. So there's pus, where we have that collection of the white blood cells and dead bacteria, and that is recruiting additional white blood cells and inflammatory cytokines to the area. And on the right, that is a carbuncle. We have several furuncles that have fused, and this is usually a bed sore. At least that's what it is on this individual. The staphylococcal causing it could well have been part of their normal flora, but as the skin was broken and lesions happened, then the bacteria spread and caused a deep, painful lesion on that individual. This is scalded skin syndrome. It can happen in newborns. It's called scalded skin because the skin looks as though it is burnt and peeling off. It is not burnt and peeling off. But the Staphylococcus aureus produces a toxin that is exfoliative, peels off the skin. It is limited to the epidermis, but that still means that if the epidermis is damaged, that leaves this newborn infant who does not have a well-developed immune system very vulnerable to other infections. Impetigo is a very common infection. It can be caused by Staphylococcus aureus or Streptococcus pyogenes. Here it's shown around the mouth and sometimes can be confused for oral herpes, but it causes a different kind of blistering. It's typically the staph or strep is already on the skin or is under the fingernails, and when scratching happens, then we get the lesions happening. Around the mouth is common, in the creases of the nose is common. The groin, where there are creases, and these are both salt-tolerant organisms. And students often get it in their armpits from carrying backpacks because that abrades the skin and the organism can get a hold and grow and develop. The treatment is topical antibiotics, and so it can be easily treated, but while the blisters are present, it is very painful. There's a picture of Streptococcus. Coccus, we know, means round cells, and strepto means that they are growing in chains. We see some kind of conglomerations here, but that is just where the chains have clumped up together. All three of these images are illnesses due to Streptococcus pyogenes. So if it's Streptococcus, it is coccus in chains, and pyogenes means it generates heat, it generates fever. So streptococcal infections are often accompanied by fever. Cellulitis looks like a rash, but it is inflammation of your cells, typically the fascia directly underneath the skin surface. Can be very serious because it becomes systemic. Erysipelas is more common in elderly people where the streptococcus are damaging the skin surface, secreting toxins and causing this redness. And we have erythema nodosum. My dog just barked and scared the crud out of me. Hold on. If I were technologically more advanced, I'd know how to edit the video after my dog lost his mind, but I'm not. So, image C, there's red lumps and nodules in the lower legs. And again, that is also caused by the Streptococcus pyogenes, and it is recruiting those non-specific innate immunity cells to cause the inflammation. And cellulitis and the erythema nodosum are treated with intravenous antibiotics, and the erysipelas is topical antibiotics. Now we get to the truly dramatic slides. This is necrotizing fasciitis. It's because of this disease that I got my PhD. I didn't know about it when I first joined the lab, but we were working with Streptococcus pyogenes that does cause this flesh-eating disease. And the Streptococcus pyogenes that do this secrete a toxin that allows them to dissolve the hyaluronan. We previously saw organisms that secrete hyaluronidase, so that destroys the connective tissue and allows the bacteria to get deeper and deeper. So surgical debridement means they remove all of the dead tissue. So the streptococci are able to not only damage the tissue but kill it. That provides them with food that they eat and then use that energy to move into even deeper tissues. Enough of that. Hot tub folliculitis. Just as the weather turns cold and people might want to be hot tubbing it, here we go. Hot tub folliculitis. Pseudomonas aeruginosa thrives in wet, warm environments. That's why it's important to keep the chemical levels, the disinfecting levels high enough in your hot tub, and also to keep the temperature up at least 102 degrees. Much lower than that, the bacteria can survive. The second image is swimmer's ear, also caused by Pseudomonas aeruginosa. The medical term is otitis externa, external, itis, inflamed, and anything with OTI or otic is the ear. So it's the outer ear canal. And again, the presence of those Pseudomonas bacteria causes inflammation and itchiness in the ear. The Pseudomonas can be diagnosed by streaking it on various agars. This xylose lysine sodium deoxycholate makes these really shiny colonies. On plain old tryptocase soy agar, it'll make this green pigment. and they might even produce this green pigment might fluoresce under ultraviolet light. So when there are infections that are suspected to be Pseudomonas, rather than culturing them, they can shine a UV light on them as a way of diagnosis. Acne, pain in the face or wherever else it shows up. I know that maskne is a problem, where the mask gets wet and stays against your skin, and that creates a moisture layer on the skin surface, traps the oil and dirt in your pores, and the bacteria can proliferate. So we can have the normal pore. A whitehead is when we start to get some initial inflammation, and we get that white little dot on the skin surface. And a blackhead is because the bacteria are oxidizing the lipids, the fats in the sebum. And when it gets exposed to the air, it turns black. Anthrax has a couple of different forms. In this chapter, we're going to talk about cutaneous anthrax because we're talking about the skin. It is caused by Bacillus anthracis. It is a gram-positive large bacillus. It also forms endospores. The bacteria can dig into tissues, and because of exotoxins, so the bacteria secrete the toxins away from themselves. That damages the skin. That releases all the nutrients in the skin. The bacteria eat those and keep going deeper. When it's grown on agar, it makes this dull, matte, fuzzy colony. And that organism is common in soil. And so skin injury could be where the endospores are introduced. And then when they're in the skin, that nutrients and water and all the other warm pH balance things our skin provides allow those endospores to germinate. We're entering into chapters where a great way to organize information are these tables. I've gone through and put red check marks next to the diseases you need to know. And of those diseases, the pathogen, what is the organism that causes it? The signs and symptoms. Remember that signs are things that are objective and measurable. Symptoms are definitely felt by the patient, but there's not an objective way to measure it. Like fever is a sign. Nausea is a symptom. Transmission, whether or not it is transmissible and how it gets transmitted, and the drug choice. How would we treat that disease? This is a terrible case of conjunctivitis. The person's conjunctiva is inflamed, and there is a pus-filled fluid emanating from their eye. That's pretty terrible. And that discharge can encrust the eyelids, can even cause the eyelids to stick shut. And so this is definitely a disease needing treatment, usually with eye drops, but there might need to be treatment of the actual eyelid if that has also become affected. This newborn has Gonococcal Ophthalmia Neonatorum. It was acquired by passage through the birth canal of a person who had gonorrhea. And so in the person with the mother with the disease may or may not have had any signs or symptoms. In persons with vaginas and uteruses, they may not have symptoms, so may not know they are infected. And so now the standard treatment is that all newborns get erythromycin eye drops. That way you don't have to worry about testing the mother to find out if there's an infection. And erythromycin eye drops are not systemic, but would take care of any low numbers of the Neisseria gonorrhea that had gotten into the infant's eyes. Chlamydia Trachomatis. All species of the genus Chlamydia are intracellular pathogens. If it gets into the eyes, it will cause scarring of the eyelid that causes the eyelashes to turn inward. So this person has had surgery on their eyelid to make sure the eyelashes stick out and aren't jabbing into the eyes. Another chart of bacterial infections of the eyes with the 3 diseases, the organisms that cause it, signs, symptoms, transmission, and treatment. Viral diseases of the skin. Warts. There's multiple plantar warts. This is someone's toe. You can also get plantar warts on the bottom of the feet. And it is essentially a benign tumor. The viral infection has caused this growth of the cells. And this is a filiform wart on an eyelid. All of these warts are caused by human papillomavirus. There are dozens and dozens of different papillomaviruses. Some of them only cause problems on the surface of the skin. Others that we'll see in a later chapter on reproductive illnesses are sexually transmitted and cause lesions on the genitals or on the anus. The treatment for warts is to use liquid nitrogen to freeze it off. Yeah, that hurts, but it does freeze it off. Or we can use a salicylic acid that will dissolve the benign tumor. That's what's in compound W. Herpes is HSV, stands for Herpes Simplex virus. Oral herpes is usually HSV1. At least 80% of the population is infected with HSV1, transmitted by kissing, sharing drinking vessels, etc. Herpes viruses are for life, so once you've got it, you don't get rid of it. The lesions tend to show up due to stressful conditions. We get the immune system stops their surveillance of suppressing the virus, and it will show up at the initial site of infection. The other herpes virus that shows up on skin is HSV2. Typically, that is genital herpes, but oral sex can transmit HSV1 to the genitals or HSV2 to the mouth. Got 2 poor little babies here. Roseola is a mild infection. It's cold-like symptoms, but a pink rash that starts on the trunk and spreads out. And fifth disease is similar, but the slapped cheek rash, where it looks like there's darker patches on the face, whereas the roseola is diffuse, little dots everywhere. You've got the dots with fifth disease, but you also have more connected dots, reddening on the cheeks. There's not really any treatment other than to alleviate any symptoms the child is experiencing. So there's our viral infections of the skin and eyes with the diseases you need to know, what causes them, signs, symptoms, etc. This is the time to make flashcards or go into Quizlet and create electronic flashcards that can be shared with your classmates. It's just a lot of information, but if you create those flashcards, you can make the connections. Now we're getting into eukaryotic pathogens. These are fungal pathogens. This person has barber's itch, where there were low numbers of a particular fungus on his skin that because of abrasions and small cuts from shaving got inflamed. Tinea pedis is athlete's foot, can also cause jock itch. And the last one is ringworm, which is not a worm, but the fungus does grow in a ring. These are all fungi, and they're called cutaneous mycoses. MYCO usually means a fungus, so it's a fungal disease, and it's in the skin, cutaneous. So these are all treated with topical antifungal medications. Dermatophytes are organisms fungi that affect the skin. When they grow in the agar, they make gigantic colonies that are often wrinkled and fuzzy. They're very distinct from bacterial colonies. Aspergillosis is caused by the fungus Aspergillus. This is what it looks like under the light microscope. It's got a stalk. It's called the hyphae. And these are all the spores. And if those spores get into a break in the skin, cause that lesion. Candidiasis is caused by the yeast, which is also a fungus, Candida albicans. So this is on the skin surface. There is other dermatophytes and candida species that can cause nail fungal infections. And again, when we grow it on agar, it makes gigantic colonies. Nail infections are extremely difficult to treat because the fungus gets not only in the nail bed, which is connected to the nail, so it's difficult to get medication to it, but also in the nail itself, which is as hardened keratin. It's very difficult for medications to penetrate. And I didn't put any check marks because you need to know all of them, but just to be consistent, I probably should do that. That one, and that one, and that one, and that one. Go back to my arrow. This is an image of a protozoan disease from Acanthamoeba. So it is an amoeba species. The cyst form, which are analogous to spores, but they are not spores. When the cysts or the reproductive stage called the trophozoite enter humans, they can get in through the eyes, they could get in through the nasal passages, and they could get in through broken skin. What I've seen cases of Acanthamoeba being talked about in the news and the literature is two different ways. Using homemade saline solution for contact lenses, where the water and the salt are not sterile, so that can introduce it directly into the eye. Into the nasal passages is the same sort of thing, using non-sterile saline in a neti pot. A neti pot can be a great tool to truly flush out pollen and other irritants in the nasal passages, but it is very important that sterile saline is used. Otherwise, you get these amoeba that can get deeper into your lungs. They can even end up in the brain. There is the cyst of the Acanthamoeba. There is the reproductive stage, the Acanthamoeba trophozoite. And there is someone with Acanthamoeba keratitis. They have applied sodium fluorescein so that it lights up where the pathogen is, and we've got significant damage to the cornea and a lot of vascularization with the inflammation being caused by that amoeba. And as if that wasn't bad enough, now we have a worm, the lower worm, 55 millimeters. Well, let's see, that's 5.5 centimeters. And 2.5 centimeters is an inch, so it's a couple inches long. Was extracted from the conjunctiva of a patient with loiasis. That's a big worm to have in your eyeball. Deer flies transmit it. We get the bite from the deer fly, and then the organism multiplies inside of us and can migrate into our eyes. It can also get in the bloodstream, and that is where the fly picks up the worm and creates the life cycle over again. So if you zoom in, you can actually see the worm in the person's eye. Again, I didn't mark these, but I can. The Acanthamoeba and the loiasis. Can never pronounce that. You're not going to have to say it. You just have to know it. That wraps up our whirlwind tour of the diseases of the skin and eyes. This chapter, chapter 21, will not be on the third exam. The third exam is going to cover chapters 13, 14, 15, 17, 18, and 19. That's enough. I did already post the study guide along with worksheets for chapters 15, 17, and 18 that will help you hone in on the actual items that you need to know, in addition to the vocabulary list and concepts that are posted there.